says that it's streaming live on YouTube.
It's working on it. We are now.
Cool. Okay, I'd like to call to order the City of Sumner study session. The date is September 14th and the time is 6:01 p.m. Reminder to everyone, the City Hall remains closed during Governor's Safe Start Order, consequence of the COVID-19 pandemic. The public is invited to attend the meeting virtually by using the Zoom meeting access information that's provided on our website. All council members are present. So I would move on to regular business. And the first item in regular business is the 2021-2022 preliminary biennial budget review. Mr. Wilson, do I turn that over to you?
Sure, Mayor. Tonight will be our first formal presentation on the department budget. As you may recall, a couple weeks ago, we went over the utility rate model, and tonight we'll be focusing primarily on utility capital, as well as some general overview of the budget process. So with that, I'll turn it over to CFO Cassandra Raymond.
Thank you. Let's get my screen shared here. So I hope everyone has had a chance to either pick up the printed binder for the 21-22 preliminary budget or review it online via PDF. If you have any questions or having any issues with accessing or picking up your budget, please reach out and let me know. So as Mr. Wilson said, tonight we'll be talking about, computer. So we'll be reviewing our utilities, the capital portions of our utility budgets. We'll also talk a little bit about the 2021-22 budget process, as well as the budget calendar and where we go from here. And with that, I will actually turn it over to Mr. Dahlem to review the utility capital.
Thank you, Cassandra. Mr. Mayor, council members, Mike Dahlem, Public Works Director. And along with me tonight, I have some subject matter experts to help answer questions. We have Jason Van Gilder and Michael Kosa, and I'm not sure if Robbie's joined us or not. We'll start with the water capital, and our goals work plan for the next biennium is to replace water mains in the downtown area to help support the downtown center plan. We working on the White River project. That's part of that is a support for our water rights application. That's for the out-of-kind mitigation. We'll also be seismic retrofitting our south tank, our 2 million gallon tank, and recoding our Sumner Springs reservoir. And we'll also be relocating the water main that's on 24th Street. We need to lower that water main before we can do the enhancement project. Next slide. Oh, and you can find our capital budget on page 167 of your budget sheets. So the total budget is $7,507,578. We have the operations facility for $500,000. We have some equipment for $62,500. Be working on our distribution systems. The Alder Kincaid supports the downtown. We also have the autoclave meter that we need to install. And then we need to complete a loop to the 8th Street to where the golf course is going to be developed. So next slide. So again, $500,000 for the operations facility. Next slide. And these are the water's proportionate share to the different equipment we need: a brush mower, a roller to compact the asphalt, and a tack coat machine so we can do more repairs to the roads. And this is the area of our water main replacements to support the downtown center plan. Next slide. Then we'll look at the capital projects in conjunction with city projects and source improvements and storage improvements and hydrant isolation valves. So one of them in 2022, we'll be spending $100,000 for the 64th and Sumner Highway reconfiguration. I think we've shown you the roundabouts that are going there. There will be a certain amount of water infrastructure that we'll need to replace along with that project. The left tank is our 2 million tank. We're going to do the seismic retrofit on. And the right tank is the Sumner Springs tank, and we'll be recoding that. So in the habitat area, enhancement area, we're going to be having about $10.7 million worth of projects between 21 and 25. We've received 1.25 million in grants already. We have 8 million pending. And that is mostly for the water rights habitat mitigation project. But again, we also have to lower our utilities in that area. So $1.4 million utility relocation. Something that kind of happened as we went through this process. We're at the last minute, we were looking at our capital projects and timing. And we had this scheduled out for 23. Last minute, we realized we need to get in there earlier and get this done. So we tried to move this to 2021, 22 biennium, this biennium. It didn't make the preliminary budget printing. So this is a request to add that to that. Next slide. So right here, we have the water main relocation added in. So it went from the 7 million that I talked about earlier to 8.9 million. Go over the source improvements, the storage improvements. Oh, I guess this is it for water. So any questions on water? We'll move to sewer.
Go ahead, Jason.
Mr. Dahlin, can you just speak briefly about if there's any impact to the rates that were presented to council last month by accelerating that project up?
So we have that project on our CIP list, and it was in the rate model. And when we realized we wanted to move it up into this biennium, we reran the rates and the SDCs, and it didn't affect the outcome of those, of what we had presented to council at the last meeting.
Thank you.
Good answer. Member Brown.
Yeah, I'm looking on page 166. And so apparently we don't have enough money. So do we have to borrow?
Pardon?
Do we need to borrow money for these activities?
No, it'll come out of utility rates. We are looking at maybe taking a bond if we don't get all the grants for the enhancement project, which is about an $8 million project. So that borrowing that money was also put in our rate model at the rate to pay it back. So we will probably be borrowing some money to complete all the water mitigation projects for the water rights.
So that 4 million deficit in cash, we hope will be taken care of.
Go ahead, Cassandra.
Councilmember Brown, I think what you're looking at is the annual revenue versus expenditures. And
Yes.
we're seeing a deficit for annual cash, But what that is just showing is just looking at that year revenues versus expenditures. There's sufficient reserves that have been accruing in the fund balance for that fund that we've been accruing for some time through the rates to cover these projects.
All right, does it say that in this?
I believe that the line you're looking at says net annual cash, but it doesn't
Yeah.
bring forward the reserves. I can certainly make that adjustment.
All right, it just looks like we don't have money.
I understand.
Any other questions council has at this time? Okay, continue.
So move on to the sewer utility. A work plan for next biennium, the sewer system is modernized lift station control panels. We have to replace a failing lift station hatch cover on 16th in the north end. We have to relocate the pump station on 24th in preparation to build a habitat project. Also on Auto Lane, we have a force main system that has been failing on us. So we need to go in and replace that system. And then we'll be doing some process control upgrades at the wastewater treatment facility. And this stuff can all be found on page 171 of your budget, the capital projects. Broke down into two different sections here, the sewer collections, $1.8 million in sewer collections and $406,000 in capital programs at the treatment facility. So if we look at the sewer collection system, 500,000 goes to the Public Works Operation Facility. Also the fair share of machinery and equipment, the roller and the tack coat machine. And the collection pump stations, will be redoing the Puyallup Station control panel, the Siebenthaler control panel, and then the 16th Street hatch covers. Go ahead. So again, 500K for the facilities. And then the sewer is participating in the roller and the tack coat machine, but not the brush mower. And then two panel replacements, one's about $200,000 and one's about $220,000.
Just a second, Mike. Go ahead, Patrick.
I also have a
Look,
question.
I just had a quick question on the new equipment that's coming in. Is that going to become part of the replacement cycle where we're setting money aside for replacement down the road?
The replacement cycle is mainly for fleet. We don't have that for our machinery like this.
Okay, thank you. I was just curious if those became part of the fleet vehicles or not.
Okay, Barb?
Yeah, so where is the Puyallup station or whatever? Is that like to the river or is it to Puyallup City?
No. It's on Puyallup Street.
Puyallup Street, oh, okay.
And where you turn from Puyallup onto Friar,
Yeah,
it's right there on the corner.
oh, okay.
And we try to keep it out of the river.
Yeah, all right.
And Puyallup.
Well, all right. And then the collection side, the 64th and Sumner Taps Highway, Auto Lane force main replacement, Alder Kincaid cross connection on Maiden Kincaid, And then the pump station relocation for White River project. And you can see right there on the pump station relocation, we only had $304,000 in for that. As we move forward here, you'll see that number goes up. So again, we needed to lower the water and replace this pump station before we did the habitat project. So we'll go over those, the collections. So again, to the left of your screen is Auto Lane, and that's where we have that force main. So we'll be replacing that to the 300,000. And then along with our water main upgrades, we have a cross connection at the end of Kincaid, right next to Main Street, where we have quite a bit of the roofs and street going into that. So that's a big I&I concern. So we'll be fixing that this biennium.
So when you say cross connection, Mike, you said that we have a bunch of stormwater runoff that is being collected that is going into the sewer at that point. Is that?
Thank you. Next one. And then this is the pump station we have on 24th Street. We'll be moving that pump station to the other side of the railroad tracks and directionally drill the force main so we can dig out that area for the habitat project. So again, you can see the pump station in red for the White River project. Now it's 2,374,000. So that brings our total up to 4,357,000. And then wastewater treatment plant, we'll talk, they have a little bit different type of machinery that they need there. They got an articulating man lift, forklift, and a gantry crane. So go ahead. Again, so $30,000 for the forklift, $60,000 for a new man lift, and then about $8,000 for a gantry crane. Next slide. And then the projects we'll be doing at the wastewater treatment plant. We'll be doing a little work at the headworks where the water first comes in, and some analyzers there. We'll be doing some work in the aeration basin. Nitrates are the next thing that we're going to have to be dealing with. So we're looking at different ways to treat that nitrate so we don't have to rebuild the plant. So we're going to do some upgrades there. Little disinfection and discharge, biosolids work, and then facilities work, plant gates mainly. So next slide. So again, 140,000.
Just a second, Mike. Go ahead, Kathy.
Does Bonnie Lake participate in some of that equipment when we buy that equipment?
So yeah, all the collections they don't participate in, but all this that I'm showing you on wastewater treatment facility, they share the cost on those.
Okay, thank you.
So we're looking at about $140,000 to modify the aeration basin to help control nitrates, and about $75,000 for analyzers at the headworks. This is our dryer. This is what we make the fertilizer out of. It's kind of surprised me when I thought back, it's about 15 years old now. Through routine maintenance, we found some bolts that were sheared off. So the plant, patched up the what they could, but we also got a hold of the manufacturer, and he needs to do some service work to it to extend its life. That service work's about $120,000. And just to kind of put it in your mind, in about 2028 is what we're thinking, we need to replace it. And that's going to be about a $6 million bill. So we already have that in our capital projects in our rate analysis. So any questions on the sewer portion? Now we'll go into the storm.
Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
On here, it says it's in the budget book at 174. I actually think the capital projects are on page 177, if I'm not mistaken. So our work plan for the storm, complete the design of the 24th Street levee setback, and hopefully start the construction by the end of the biennium. Complete the design for the fish passage culvert at 64th and Taps Highway. So again, while we rebuild those intersections, we need to provide a fish-friendly fish passage under there. So we'll probably end up being a box culvert of some sort. We're going to construct some improvements at 160th and Elm, and we'll connect Salmon Creek to its new alignment, where we just put the regional detention pond in. We built a stream bed, and hopefully next year we'll transfer that stream into that new bed. We wanted to give it some time to develop a little bit before we put water into it and wash everything out. Next slide. So $13.1 million in projects, again, 500,000 for the operation facilities, 107 for machinery, about 8 million budgeted for the White River Restoration Project, about 2 million for Salmon Creek projects, 2 million for system improvements, and then 130 for capital projects that we have to spend money on in the storm to complete those. Again, 500K for the operations facility. And then the storm's fair share of the brush mower, tack coat machine, and the roller. And then again, the money we have budgeted, the 8.15 million budgeted, will complete the design of the 24th and about 90% design on Pacific Point Bar and the left bank, Stewart Road left bank. And hopefully we'll be getting into construction at the end of the biennium. We have quite a few projects on Salmon Creek. Again, kind of the biggest one is the 64th Street crossing to support the new intersections. There's some culverts that are fish barriers that we need to replace. We want to acquire a little bit more property on Salmon Creek. And then we talked about the channel realignment. That'll be tying into that new channel for $380,000. So about $2 million worth of money we're going to be putting into Salmon Creek. And the next one is the corner. If you've driven the corner of 160th and Elm, it has a steep ditch on the inside. The water quality, stormwater quality that goes through there is pretty bad. There's a lot of iron oxide, so it pulls in all this colored water. So this project will be putting in a piping system and some treatment, and then hopefully being able to widen that road around that corner. And I think that's it for capital projects. Any other questions?
Any questions council has of Mr. Dahlem regarding the utility capital projects? Go ahead, Patrick.
Thank you, Mayor. This may be a Cassandra question. I'm pretty sure it is. With the golf course funds, I'm curious when those are anticipated to come, and how will those be denoted when we are transferring money back and forth between capital funds?
Actually, and defer that question over to Mr. Wilson.
Thank you, Cassandra. So I think it's important to realize that the sale of the golf course is still likely years away. It is a general fund asset, which means that all sale proceeds will come into the general fund. And it'll really be a council decision at that time of where to allocate those funds to. Obviously, you know, we have a major restoration project that is part of that sale. I don't think it's reasonable to assume that that project can be pulled off without some of those golf course sale proceeds helping to pay for that project. Andrea, do you have anything to add from your time today? I know you've been working on this.
Well, just to set expectations on the anticipated timeline, as the city presented back in August, we anticipate applying for a core permit in October of this year. Sometime between 12 and 18 months later, we expect a core permit to be issued. And after that time, there are several things that need to occur on that property before the purchaser is willing to close. There are conditions to closing. So if that helps paint the picture about when those proceeds may become available, best case scenario, I think we're looking at sometime 2022 at the very earliest.
And that helps answer my question, because I wasn't sure if we were going to be seeing some of that or all of it coming in this biennium or not, or if it would be maybe and probably into the next.
Yeah, maybe and probably into the next.
About most likely into the next, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, other questions, council? Go ahead, Cindy.
Okay, because I can't find my little green hand to notify you or whatever, but
That's right. I saw you waving, Cindy. It works.
okay. So, Mr. Dahlem, what is a force main? And then the other one is when you're recoating those tanks, are you recoating the inside surface, or are you just repainting the outside of the spring?
Okay, the force main, there's kind of two different types of main. There's gravity. So when the waste goes into the line, it just flows downhill. If we can't gravity it all the way to the treatment plant, we have to lift it up and pump it. And we pump it through a force main as opposed to a gravity main. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it sure does. Thank you on that.
On the 2 million gallon tank, we're about to draw it down. Now we're on hold a little bit because the fire kind of burnt up our drain pipe. That's what you get for using plastic drain pipe. But we'll inspect the inside. We recoated that a few years ago. Sometimes I say that and realize that actually that's quite a few years ago, but that's just because I'm getting old. So we'll inspect it. Right now, I don't think we're anticipating painting either one of the insides.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions council members have of Mr. Dahlem regarding any of the capital projects for the utilities? Seeing none.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mike. Jeff, I saw that you unmuted yourself. Are you up next?
Yes, so Cassandra and I will be kind of briefly discussing the budget process, what we have done so far to get to this point, and where we'll be moving forward through our next series of budget meetings over the next month and a half to 2 months. As always, the budget is a planning document. It's a financial document that really kind of sets the narrative for the city moving forward for 2 years. And it's always built on our mission, which is to provide needed and valued services that promote our sense of community. We often, we like to look at things in the budget and make sure that they fit in the council's strategic priorities. Sorry, that's a difficult word to say. Which once again are safe and efficient transportation system, protection of water, open spaces, and natural resources, long-range financial stability to provide a balance of city services, and enhancing community character. There's really several different methodologies for building a budget. You can start at zero and start all again every year, or you can take what you've had the previous 2 years and add a certain percentage with it. This year, the directive to the department heads was to kind of begin with your core services and build from that. Department directors were asked to eliminate any one-time items from their previous budgets and any program expansions that they have in their previous budget. Kind of really looking at those needed services as outlined in our mission. And then the mayor and Jason evaluated any new requests under the framework of the strategic priorities, and then added in new resources as priorities allowed. Some of the budget assumptions that we were dealing with. Obviously, as far as revenues go, the city is very conservative in our revenue forecasts. We base it on trends. We're constantly watching and analyzing things like sales tax, the health of our retail sector in town, the automotive industry, looking at building permits and trying to be as conservative as possible so we can come back and tell you that we had more money than we anticipated as opposed to less. We have the impacts of COVID-19 to consider. They've impacted us now, and some considerations of what they will be doing moving forward as we go into 2021. There's always structural limitations. Property tax is the general fund's second biggest revenue source, and as you know, it's limited to only increase by 1% per year, which is never keeping up with inflation. But we do have some good news on the expenditure side. Our labor assumptions, we actually turned out to be a lot better than what we had originally forecasted. Originally, we forecasted a 4.5% increase on labor, and it's coming in a lot closer to 2 or less. We forecasted 9% increase in medical, and medical is only a 7% increase. So that's helped us with some savings. And then really, like we said, sticking with a very status quo for operations. And then in the utility funds, as you've already reviewed, those budgets are all driven by the rate model.
So as we were developing the budget, one of the things that Jeff mentioned is the directive to our directors as far as their budget proposals was really look at your core services, but also provide a listing of those things that that are priorities that really should have resources directed towards them. Some of the unfunded items that we are still seeing in the budget are the general fund portion of the Public Works Operations Facility. As you just saw from Mr. Dalton's presentation, water, sewer, and storm have funding that is allocated for that project. We do anticipate that's going to be a debt financed project. And so we need to keep in mind that the general fund, which holds street operations, will bear part of that cost. As we look forward at our city facilities, we know that the roof replacement of City Hall is going to need to be a topic of conversation. The roof has very few years of life remaining on it, and that'll really be part of a bigger conversation on where we go with that building. And then what does that roof replacement look like? Do we keep bandaging it along, or do we look at a full replacement? So it's something that we are keeping in the back of our mind. The Main and Wood intersection, this is a project that Public Works is currently working on design. Construction is not currently funded, and it's not likely to score very high in a lot of our grant cycles. So that's something that we would look at funding. As well as a proposal has come up to do some remodels at our senior center. And really the proposal is to add generator capabilities, which the senior center doesn't have, in shower facilities. This gives us the benefit of not only being able to keep the facility open during times of power outages or other emergencies, but it provides the ability to open the senior center for sheltering, which is not something that we have that capacity right now. Some of the items that we're still seeing as being underfunded from the departments are the sidewalk program. We have funding in the current budget proposal for the voluntary sidewalk program at its historical level. So that was kept coming forward from the last biennium. What Public Works would like to do is increase the city projects and expand the voluntary sidewalk program. Street maintenance is always, it's a perennial issue. We do have funding in the current budget, the budget proposal for chip sealing and crack sealing. Public Works would like to expand that just to shorten the cycle of the chip sealing and crack sealing on the city streets. And then trail maintenance is something that we've talked about for quite some time. The city has a significant investment in its trail system, and we have some deferred maintenance and just other routine maintenance that needs to be kept up to keep those trails in tip-top shape. So when we're looking at our overall budget, one of the things that we did want to come back to council and discuss was the council strategic reserve. If you remember, when we were in late 2017, we were developing the property tax levy proposal for tax year 2018. And a portion of the property tax at that point in time was dedicated for council appropriation in budget development. Again, that began for tax year 2018. At the end of 2020, we'll have a little over $1 million available. And then if council's direction over the next biennium is to continue that property tax levy dedication, the 1.7 million at the end of the 21-22 biennium. Per the resolution that reserves those funds, again, those are dedicated for council appropriation during the budget process. They do require council approval in order to allocate. And so we will be coming back to council for really direction on where council would like to go with that as we move forward with developing the 21-22 budget. And then looking at our budget calendar, I actually kind of wanted to set this to the tune of it's the most wonderful time of the year, but you know, I just wasn't sure everyone would enjoy that. I like it, so this is my happy time. Next study session, we'll be talking about streets, parks, and facilities. That'll be both the operating portion that's in the general fund, as well as the capital portions that are in their own individual funds. October 12th, we'll be talking about our property tax levy for tax year 2021, as well as starting to dig into the general fund operating programs. October 19th, we have a public hearing for property tax. This is a statutorily required public hearing. October 26th, we'll have a study session talking about all the other funds. Some of those might be as small as our drug seizure fund, which doesn't have a whole lot of activity, but really the stars of that evening will be our internal service funds for fleet operations, fleet replacement, and information technology. November 2nd, we'll have our first public hearing on the budget. We'll also have our resolution adopting the property tax levy for tax year 2021. That has to be certified to Pierce County no later than November 30th. So that's really the one that has the strictest timeline. November 16th, we'll have our second public hearing for the budget, and then planning on an ordinance adopting our budget November the 30th. So ideally, we will have this adopted and buttoned up prior to the holiday season, or at least prior to the Christmas season. We know that's a little bit of an aggressive schedule, especially when we're talking about the general fund. So, you know, there's always the possibility of spending some more time at Finance Committee or scheduling scheduling another study session to really dive into the general fund. I would encourage everyone, please spend some time with your budget books. I'm happy to meet on Zoom or phone or whatever works for you to go over any details. And that's what we had this evening.
Go ahead, Patrick.
Thank you. And I just want to say thank you for all the work on this, although it's complete joy for you, Cassandra, to do this. But I also like the item in there about possibly using some of the council directed funds toward sidewalks and street maintenance. And that's something that I would be in favor of seeing what that looks like. Because that fund was there for us to use in emergency and backup. And I think it's big enough now that if we use a portion of it or even up to half, we'll still have a significant chunk in there as an emergency for council to use. So thank you for that.
Okay. Any other questions? Any other questions or comments by council members at this time, either about the process or about what was presented tonight? Okay, crickets. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Cassandra. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Jason. I think I got them all. Okay. With that, we go on to the next item, which is the Pride Crosswalks. Is that you, Mr. Wilson?
It is, Mayor. Okay, how about I got my screen figured out? All right, thank you, Council. Tonight we're going to be talking about Pride crosswalks. As a reminder, back in the beginning of August, we had a resident come to a city council meeting and request that the city consider installing a Pride crosswalk. He said that this would be a symbol to show that the community is welcoming and inclusive. He also provided some examples from other cities. As an example, the one on the screen here is one of the images that he presented, and it's from Capitol Hill up in Seattle. He also discussed the possibility of, if the city was to go down this path, that we may want to consider using the Progress Pride flag instead of the standard 7-color Pride flag. So just another option to consider. I do want to say, I forgot to mention before I started this presentation, that this is a very high-level presentation. It summarizes my multi-page staff report that's included in your packet, as well as several supporting documents. After that meeting, or actually at that meeting, council requested that staff look into this and come back to this study session with a recommendation. We set out and we looked at different ways you could apply colored crosswalks to the street. And there's two main ways. There's paint, and then there's thermoplastic. Staff does not recommend paint because, like any other street striping, it's something that has to be refurbished on a regular basis to maintain its color and its visibility. So we looked primarily at thermoplastic, and it's about $7,500 per crosswalk. And that's based on crosswalks that are the size of either like alder in Maine or wood in Maine. We then went and got a legal opinion. The reason why we got a legal opinion is twofold. Number one, we contacted our insurance company because they would ultimately have to defend us if we've adopted a crosswalk that did not follow MUTCD. And we also knew going into this that we didn't believe that MUTCD covered crosswalks that were non-traditional. Just as a reminder, MUTCD stands for the Model Uniform Traffic Control devices, and it's a federal regulation with the force of law. This is something that the Federal Highway Administration, who manages the MUTCD, has looked at multiple times over the last 20 or so years. The most recent ruling was in 2013, and where in that ruling, or their opinion, they expanded what colors were appropriate to be put on streets. And they did this because they started seeing more and more cities come up with alternate colors for different things. A good example of this is the picture in the top right. Green has been used for bike lanes, red for fire lanes or transit lanes, and then purple for toll lanes. They wanted to formalize what each one of those colors could be used for. And that's one of the things in the MUTCD, it really focuses in on what colors mean what. And when I say colors, they don't go as far as just saying yellow is for the center lines. It's very specific hue of yellow down to the RGB components of that color. In that 2013 ruling, they emphasized that non-traditional crosswalks, or crosswalks that did not follow the MUTCD, were a danger. And they based that on that they didn't feel that people could cross them safely because it could be a distraction for drivers. They could also turn into novelties. A good example of a novelty type crosswalk is the 3D one that's on the bottom of the screen here. The attorney that provided us the legal opinion, it's important to know that he is an attorney for our insurance company, but he's in private practice. And one of the things that he does is he's actually one of the few attorneys that sits on the MUTCD board that helps develop and review these regulations. And he provided some context specifically to the 3D one, where when this was installed in a city, some people thought it was actually raised off the road, and it caused people to leave the road and drive up on the sidewalk. The other challenge with non-conforming crosswalks is the legal liability. In recent years, litigation against cities has gone up dramatically. Specifically looking at crosswalk cases that our insurance companies had to deal with, they've had 18 crosswalk cases with $35 million in total loss. Only 2 times did the city prevail, and these were collisions that occurred in conforming METCD crosswalks. So they weren't an artistic, not a Pride, not a Pan-African, nothing like that, just a standard style crosswalk. And even in those collisions that occurred in those well-designed crosswalks, cities typically are not winning. The attorney was very concerned that if we intentionally violated the METCD, it'd be very difficult, if not impossible, to defend. And the other thing that's come up is cities that have installed non-conforming crosswalks have gotten letters from the Federal Highway Administration saying that, okay, as we understand you have this crosswalk, it doesn't follow METCD. If you were to apply for federal funds to improve that intersection in the future, you'd have to restore the crosswalk to a standard design. And the last issue that the attorney brought up was the First Amendment issues that could happen here. How do you decide what type of non-conforming crosswalk is appropriate versus offensive, which can lead to high risk for litigation if you say, well, I'm okay with a Pride crosswalk, but I'm not okay with a crosswalk that represents a hate group. So difficult things to sometimes manage and come up with clear regulations that are strong enough to support your opinion in court. We then went back to our insurance company. As a reminder, the City of Sumner, we're part of a risk pool, the Washington City's Insurance Authority. The benefit of being part of a pool is we get to buy insurance on the market, and we share the cost of that insurance with about 200 other cities and special benefit districts. It's a far better way to get insurance. Right now, the private market for insurance is very difficult. I'm actually on the budget committee for WCIA. This is one of the things that they've been talking about for a number of years now is these cities that have been historically self-insured are losing their insurance, or the cost of insurance premiums are going up so much that they're trying to get back into a risk pool. And there's only a couple of risk pools in Washington that accept cities, WCIA being the largest. So we asked them, okay, so we have this legal opinion, we have this potential policy decision for council. Where would WCI lie on this? And of course, they're not going to take a definitive position on this. We likely would be covered if we installed the non-conforming crosswalk and somebody got injured, but they acknowledge it'd be very difficult to offend. Our rates for insurance are based on our claim history. So if we have a negative claim history, it does impact our rates. I will say right now we have an excellent claim history, knock on some wood there. We actually experience lower claim history than most cities our size. But if that was to change, or we get a very difficult claim that was a high settlement agreement or verdict, it could result in expulsion from WCA if we are negligent or don't resolve those issues. So let's talk about our claim history in Sumner. The good news is we've had no roadway design claims in the past decade. Just in contrast, so we've had 13 sidewalk claims in the last decade, and those are typically trip and fall type incidents. I will say the data is likely incomplete due to claim filing timelines. If you're going to file a claim against a city, you have typically 3 years to do so. We know that there's probably some things sitting out there right now that could come before the city. So we may or may not have a roadway design claim that actually has occurred in the last 10 years. We just may not know about it yet. Do want to caution, good claim history does not mean lower risk. It just means we haven't had any negative incidents that have happened. The other thing we looked at was vehicle versus pedestrian collisions. The first data set we looked at was 2014 to 18. We had 16 collisions. These are all vehicle versus pedestrian type collisions. 3 of those resulted in serious or fatal injuries. 1 of those was in a marked crosswalk. In 2019, we had 4 collisions. 1 resulted in a serious or fatal injury that was not in a crosswalk, and 2 collisions with minor injuries occurred in marked crosswalks. One thing I've heard some people say is, well, if we put them in certain parts of town with a lower speed limit, it's going to be safer. Yes, obviously speed is a major factor in vehicle versus pedestrian collisions and how severely people are injured. But I will say, as this graph illustrates, even at 20 miles per hour, 10% of those collisions result in a fatality. And even if they do survive the collision, doesn't mean they may not have serious injuries. And I've seen many collisions at lower speeds that had a dramatic impact on those that were hit by a car. So other cities. This picture, just for reference, is City of Seattle, one of their Pan-African community crosswalks that they installed. Right now, they have over 20 community crosswalks. They developed the community crosswalk program after the initial 11 Pride crosswalks were installed. They had to do that because after they installed the 11 crosswalks, they had some communities go out and start painting crosswalks without authorization from the city. So that led to oh my gosh, what are we going to do here? So they used some levy dollars and they matched the community at 50% when these crosswalks go in. And then the city will provide basic maintenance of the thermoplastic. They keep enough on hand to do minor little repairs, but when the crosswalk is at end of life, the community will have to raise funds, at least 50%, to replace it. Talking with the City of Seattle this morning, they have had none that have had to been replaced yet because he started going in late 2015, and they have a 5 to 7 year life. So they're kind of right coming up on the first round that'll probably need to be replaced. Interesting with Seattle, they've had no discernible increase in pedestrian collisions in which the crosswalk was the proximate cause. Yes, they have had vehicle versus pedestrian collisions in these crosswalks, but the crosswalk itself was not deemed to be a factor in those collisions. And then Tacoma, they have no plans to install them. They did look at doing so earlier this year and they decided against it based on the legal liability. So that brings us to the staff recommendation. Due to the Federal Highway Administration's METCD standards and potential legal liability, staff cannot recommend the installation of a non-conforming crosswalk. We do recommend, though, looking at some alternative ways to demonstrate our welcoming and inclusive city. This was an interesting decision because if you look at the data, you can make an argument that they might be okay, but the risk for the city just does not outweigh that possibility. So I want to take a couple minutes to talk about alternatives that we have in progress. You know that we have some murals going up right now. The top one is a privately funded mural. It's been installed already on the side of the Sumner Cafe building off of Alder Street. The second one on the bottom is in the process of being installed. This is a city funded mural that was championed by the Arts Commission. This is on the side of the liquor store. There's also another one that I don't have a picture of that was privately funded, and it's on the side of the real estate office across from Heritage Park. And as you can see, both of these art installations celebrate diversity and inclusivity. Other things that staff were working on is events. Events are a good way to show our community as being more welcoming and inviting. That comes down to the types of music and food that you have at these events or vendors. We met last week and again this morning with the Sumner Downtown Promotions Association, who hosts Rhubarb Days, and they were completely on board for changing their musical offering and their food offering. They have some new leadership with the Sumner Downtown Promotion Association, specifically on the event side that we didn't even have to ask. They actually brought this up as an issue and we're like, great, that's what we're here to talk to you about. So very positive, and they're excited to do that. At the same time, we have the Arts Commission. Staff is recommending that we come back to council maybe by the end of the year and look at what's the purpose of the Arts Commission, what's their mission, and what does council want to see them work on in the future. the same time, we're having the conversation with the Arts Commission. What's important to them? What do they have in their work plan for 21-22? I want to make sure that whatever the Arts Commission is working on is meeting council's goals and objectives. Other examples, these are things that we have not done, but things that the city could consider doing. We could display a pride flag at a city facility or park. A lot of cities are starting to do this. Sometimes they do it just in conjunction with Pride Month. Sometimes they do it all year. The one caution is it could lead to First Amendment issues. Some cities have had to address that. Most can overcome them, but I just need to point that out. And then there's other art displays. The bench here is from a park down in California. As we work on our parks or our Main Street design, maybe that's something that we could look at incorporating. I want to caution the council though, as we deal with art, I think we need to be careful not to step on the Arts Commission toes, because right now, as their code is set up, they're the ones that should be helping lead that charge when it comes to public art displays, and I don't want to discourage them from being involved. That's why I think it's important that our council and our Arts Commission understand what each other's goals and objectives are. So with that, open it up for discussion.
Yeah, and then before I call on any of you, just share my own thoughts. When it was originally presented to us, I was actually pretty intrigued. I thought of my one of my gay sons. I thought of a gay sister-in-law, and I thought of a deceased gay uncle and many gay friends. And I thought, what a way to show, our openness towards that community. But when staff came to me, with the legal analysis and the liability issue, that part of me said, despite what my heart was saying, my mind told me that no, I agreed with staff and wouldn't recommend that we do this with council, and instead try to find other ways to be inclusive of the gay community. Anyway, that was my own struggle and what I went through and where I'm coming from. Anyway, with that, council members, comments, questions? Go ahead, Kathy.
Sure.
Oh, did you call me, Bill?
Yeah, Kathy, and then Barb.
Okay. For me, I have been putting it out to my clients for the last 3 weeks. And I know change is hard for everybody. It has not been received very well. It seems Sumner residents kind of like Sumner downtown looking the way it does. And honestly, the biggest comment I had was that they were not wanting to make Sumner look like Seattle. So I'm just going to leave it at that. That's what I heard for 3 weeks. I found maybe 3 people that were on board with it, but I got no other people wanted it. So that's my comment.
Okay, thank you, Kathy. We'll go to Barb and then we'll go to Patrick.
So I agree about the crosswalks after I read all the, reports from the attorney and, what the city has put together. And so I think that's probably is not the best idea for us to go, but I like the idea that perhaps there's something, with these new murals that are coming into town, where they could be recognized, or I like that bench. I thought that was a great idea. But I also wonder, we got the LBGT, I'm sorry if I don't have all the letters correct, but community that wants to be recognized, but we also have others in the city. So, if we need to be open to whoever might want to have some recognition. So that is what I have to say.
Okay, thanks, Barb. Go to Patrick and then Melanie and then Charlotte. Go ahead, Patrick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I up until last week even, I was really open to the idea of not only exploring the crosswalks, but even looking at some additional artistic opportunities for some of them. But in light of the legal information and the feedback that we've received, the one that really sticks out for me is that we would have to willfully bypass or willfully ignore the federal standard in order to install these. That carries a lot of weight with me. One of them, like I said, I not only did I like this idea, but I like the idea for some type of art competitions or exploring that. But in lieu of the restrictions and the risks that it puts on the city, I'm actually back to straight standard, the federal guidelines and following those.
Okay, thanks, Patrick. Go ahead, Melanie.
Thank you. So I appreciate the presentation for sure. Obviously, a lot of work and many conversations have happened in between the first ask and now. So thank you to staff for that. Thank you for the calls, Jason. I appreciate it. And a very thorough presentation tonight on the risks, which I completely understand, and that is your role. I also love the offer of other options. I do think if we go down the path of other options, it does need to be explicit, like explicitly about pride for the LGBTQ plus community. So that way there's clarity around that. And it's not necessarily just around representation, it's around acceptance. So just a little clarity around that. And also just to note that the Arts Commission was consulted about this and we're excited about it. Now that of course is before they knew about the risks, because we all just heard about that right now. But at the time that was the case. So what I feel is missing from tonight's presentation is the intent behind this type of symbol. And I'm not huge on sharing stories, but the timing of this was undeniable. So this weekend we had a painter come to our house. We had a couple projects and my wife and I were showing this painter around, you know, this here, that there. We walked him out to our carport where we have our paint and he was like, I don't normally do this, but I just want to talk to you about my daughter, and shared that she has had challenges around this, particularly because she's from a conservative family, a religious family, and we live in a town that is very religious. Now there are definitely communities of faith that are accepting, but they are few and far between. So I think we need to really think about who's in our community. And Kathy, I really appreciate you sharing the feedback of your clients, because I think that really speaks to exactly this point, that we have folks in town that don't necessarily get it. Maybe it wasn't part of their upbringing, I'm not sure their age, but it speaks exactly to why something like this is so incredibly important. We have youth in our community that are crying themselves to sleep, that don't feel supported. And to do something as simple as this or painting a bench, I feel like is what the least that we could do. So, and it's not just about youth, it's about adults as well. There are plenty of adults that are not comfortable in their own skin, and this is helpful. So I understand it's a risk, for sure. I understand that even if tragedy struck, we would lose the claim almost certainly, regardless of if the crosswalk were a typical crosswalk or an artistic crosswalk. So for me, the risk is moot at that point. We're already going to lose. So why not take on the risk by supporting the members of our community who are the most disenfranchised and at risk, particularly when it comes to our youth. So that's why I will support a crosswalk in particular. And if for some reason we're not able to come to consensus on that, then I'd like us to move forward to another option. Thank you.
Thanks, Melanie. Go ahead, Charlotte.
Thank you. So one thing I did, so I agree and would like to reiterate Melanie's thanks to staff. And I've had conversations with some staff. I know a lot of work went into this, and I do appreciate that. And even more so in the memo, you know, which I had read last week. I appreciate all of that. And I understand the responsibility that staff has, and especially the insurance company. But some things that were left out is that oftentimes the insurance company will also tell you not to install a crosswalk at all, because just doing that alone would assume liability. I haven't heard anything that says that there's additional risk in changing it. As someone who's actually been hit by a vehicle while crossing the street in a conforming crosswalk with an actual walk light, I think that this is still doable with parameters. For instance, I wouldn't recommend us relying on a standalone crosswalk. I would suggest or recommend that we consider artful possibilities because that really is kind of becoming some of Sumner's brand, with the murals, with the parklets, with like, you know, that Sumner, like even how we've done the bridge, like we are innovative with our creativity. I would, if a council member is willing to second it, because I know it takes 2 council members to move forward a motion, I would still like to have a motion for consideration that would allow us to have, I would say, some like designs in our crosswalks. I need to pause for a second. I view all kinds of potential here. You can have an art contest with high school students with certain parameters. So I agree with Melanie. I think that the pride acceptance is huge, but I see so much more potential beyond just one crosswalk. And if we do it well, I still think it could be done. And I haven't heard anything that suggests that will be the cause of the loss of a lawsuit, because we're already losing them. But I would suggest that we have artful crosswalks only where we already have either a stop sign or staff can fill in the technical verbiage for this one, but a stop sign, a crosswalk, some other additional indicator that it is safe to cross the street in that location. But I still think there is a lot of possibility here. And I haven't heard anything that makes this riskier than the crosswalks we already have on Main Street.
Okay, other council members that haven't commented so far. Go ahead, Cindy.
Okay, I'm unmuted, right?
Yes, you are.
Okay. Well, I do want to thank staff for really exploring and researching this citizen idea, because it got me excited and I could just see all kinds of possibilities in it. But I also got brought back down to reality by the information presented by the staff, and I have to go with the staff recommendation right now. I just think it's just a little too early to bring this on as a city project. So that's basically it. I think I'm going to back the staff conclusion as of right now, and hopefully we can continue to come up with other inclusive and equity type projects that will continue to show that Sumner feels that way. But I think they're going to have to be smaller and slower and meet our audience where they are and just begin building a bigger and more supportive community as a whole. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Cindy. Any other council members that haven't spoken yet that wish to make a comment? Go ahead, Kurt.
All right. I respect people's choices on how they live. And the people I've talked to also respect that a lot. But they said, many of them said, though they respect the way people live or choose to live, they don't want their ways of life pushed on them. They seem to be able to get along with people without maybe a crosswalk. And so I'm against this 100%. What about other groups that might have a vision? What do we do about them? Do we have other crosswalks? I mean, I'm all in favor of being inclusive, but there's got to be other ways to do it. Events, sidewalk art, flags. And I believe we are a welcoming, sorry about that, welcoming community. And I heard that the high school has a problem with, the situation. Well, God dang it, they need to get on that and deal with it. When we had a problem at school, we dealt with it. And I know we want to support that too, but I'm against pride crosswalks. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Kurt. I think we have heard from everybody. What I sense is that a majority of the council is not in favor of doing it. Yeah, I tell you, Melanie, part of what you said, rang through to me, and that is the need to do something explicitly, and to show acceptance. My problem is that I probably disagree with Charlotte in terms of the legal aspects of a crosswalk, but in terms of some other way of doing it, I think it is important. On this particular issue, Charlotte, you're right. If there are two members of the council that wish to bring this forward and, to the whole council for consideration, you can certainly do that, and have it formally considered, at a council meeting. I'm just saying, me going along right here and looking at it, I didn't see where it had a majority of the council in favor of it right now. Go ahead, Charlotte.
So I would like to be able to figure that out via phone calls or email later. I don't want to take an informal vote at a study session.
Right. And thank you for that comment. I think that'd be the best way to do it, is to have a discussion with staff and other council members and try to figure out what it is.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Bring back to the council.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yep. Okay. Any other council members? Okay. Mr. Wilson, City Administrator report.
Nothing tonight, Mayor. I just have something under scheduling when we get there.
Okay. So we go on to agenda setting in terms of council meeting agendas or committee calendar. Any issues? Go ahead, Barb.
Yeah, the upcoming meeting schedule and study sessions, and I noticed that there are at least three sessions on diversity and equity going till the end of the year. And I was just wondering, what is the expectation of those studies? And why do we have so many scheduled?
Well, let me start out, and then Jason, you can you can follow up. I for one thought it was important to continue the discussion of diversity, equity, and to try to do it on a monthly basis. I think the last session we had, in which the video presentation, it was pretty informative to me. I got feedback from some of their council members that it was. And so I think the intent is to continue with that discussion, Barb, through
Okay.
the year. But Jason, I'll let you tag on the end of that one.
No, Mayor, I think
Well, that at least helps give.
Go ahead, Councilmember Potato.
The mayor's comments were helpful to understand why, but I'd like to hear what you might have to add to it.
Sure. The only other thing I would add is we'll be using that time to also update you on what staff has been working on, specifically our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments on calendar issues, either the council meeting or its council committees? Go ahead, Jason.
I just wanted to run by this group. There's 5 Mondays in November, and you might have noticed during Cassandra's presentation that she skipped over the Monday that is the week of Thanksgiving. So I just wanted to throw it out, do a quick head nod here. Does everybody want to take that Monday off and instead have the Monday after Thanksgiving, which would be the 5th Monday, as the second study session, as long as we're on schedule?
Okay.
Yes.
Is that a head nod? Yes.
Yeah, if it works better for
Yes.
staff, great.
Don't care.
I hear you, Charlotte.
Yeah, I'll do whatever works for staff and other council members.
I guess the good news is, even if you're not in town because you're celebrating with somebody somewhere else, you could still join. So the choice of virtual meetings.
That is just a sick comment. It really is. That's so true. You're out of town, so what? Too bad, dial in. Okay. So I'm sort of getting, okay, yeah, let's skip that one, and then that'll free up the week, even though we can call in from wherever we are. Gives us a little break. Okay. I don't see any other council, nobody else say anything. That's good. Okay, we do not have an executive session, right, Jason? Good answer. Okay, that brings us to adjournment, and the time is 7:18. Be safe, everyone. And right now, the best guess that Andrea and I were looking at in terms of the weather is that the advisory continues through till sometime on Thursday, right, Andrea?
Yeah, hazardous or unhealthy air through at least Thursday.
Oh,
Man,
With expected lightning on Thursday and possible rain on Friday. We'll see.
right.
so did you schedule in a break for an earthquake and a flood?
I'm waiting for the locust to come in myself here.
Right.
Don't forget the Lamar, but that's later this fall.
That's later this fall. Yeah, thanks. Anyway, as a reminder, please try to stay indoors. If you have, systems in which you can run the air through your filters and your furnaces, do that to clean the air. If that, you can always wear an N95 mask. That'll be pretty comfortable throughout the day. But anyway, just be careful and be safe. Okay, take care, everyone.
All right.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Good meeting.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.